Hey guys, it's time for our next chapters of Gossamer, chapter 20. The young woman glanced at the clock on the wall of the school office. 10 more minutes till she could take a break. Then she'd have to walk all the way out to her car and sit there to have a cigarette. Last job she had, they could smoke out behind the kitchen. The waitresses all gathered there on breaks. Schools were different, though. She knew that. Of course, they wouldn't want young kids seeing people indulging in bad habits. She hated that she had smoked so much in front of John. Not as bad as what Dwayne did, though, she thought, getting drunk all the time, right in front of his own kid. She sighed and looked back at the computer screen. It was pretty easy, the work. Good thing she'd taken the course. Dwayne hadn't wanted her to. He said she got good money and tips at the restaurant. What was she trying to do? Turn into some kind of businesswoman or something? She was too dumb for that, airhead, he called her. But she had hung in there and taken the course mornings, had traded her breakfast shifts with one of the other waitresses, hadn't missed a class. And once she got the hang of it, the computer stuff was easy. It was all organized and made sense. There was a satisfying feeling to it, the way everything had a place. And she could find it clicking a few keys. It was mysterious to her, though, how it worked, how all the information. There were 300 kids in school, and all of their files stored here could be pulled forward by the touch of her fingers. If only life were that easy. How's it going? You've been here what, a week? Any problems? A cheerful voice interrupted her daydreaming. It's going good. I'm getting the hang of it. The assistant principal, with his bright patterned necktie, was beside her desk, looking down at her with a smile. She'd forgotten his name. Walking through the office, he'd stopped to see how she was doing. Nice of him. They were all nice here. She wouldn't tell him about the problem finding a place to smoke, for sure. He wouldn't have much sympathy for that. When school starts next week, it'll be a little crazy for a while, he told her with a chuckle. A little noisy. Yes, sir, I won't mind. I wanted to thank you, he said. Thank me? She looked at him nervously. Would he thank her for coming in this week? But now, after school starts Monday, they wouldn't need her anymore? Her heart sank. She needed this job. The hours were just right. John could be here, and she would see him during the day and know he was okay. But no, he wasn't giving her notice. The woman who called about enrolling her little girl, he was saying. I can't think of her name. It was Mrs. Merriman, and her little girl is Caroline. That's it. She told me you did such a good job with the school records from wherever it was, Michigan, she reminded him. That's it. She told me you did such a good job with the records. Oops, sorry, lost my place. Michigan, she reminded him. Yes, thank you for that. That poor woman was so upset when she thought the records had been lost. She laughed. It had been easy solving that problem, and it felt good, soothing the distraught woman. Well, he turned to leave. Someone from the front counter handed him a paper to sign. Glad to have you with us. Thank you, she said shyly, and looked back at her computer. Soon, she thought, her son's name would be in there. The building would be noisy with children, and he could be one of them. Hey, John, she'd hear in the hall, a kid calling to her boy, and the two would laugh at some joke, and there would be kids' artwork hanging on the walls, and one picture would have his signature, John. She'd be so proud then. She just needed to get him back. That was important, the urgent thing. And she was making a start now. The apartment was cleaned up, sort of. She had a job. The assistant principal liked her, she could tell, and other people did. The principal's secretary had brought her a cup of coffee. The custodian said, Good morning, sunshine, to her every morning. One of the library assistants had asked where she'd gotten her shoes. She could make friends, maybe. Dwayne had never let her have friends. The last time she had friends, she realized, was high school. After that, it was just Dwayne, who wouldn't let her do anything but work, who wouldn't even let her drive. And then, of course, there had been John, her little boy with his chipped tooth and curly hair. Now they were both gone. Dwayne, good riddance. But she'd get back John soon. She looked up at the clock again and decided to forget going to her car for a cigarette. Instead, she'd use her break to call the social worker. Chapter 21. I think it helped, at least a little, Littlest whispered to Thin Elderly. Look how he's smiling. Together they watched the little boy's face. It did seem calmer, more rested than it had. He'd lay on his side, snuggled against his pillow, with one arm curled around a shabby stuffed creature. Good work, littlest one. And to think, you accomplished that with fragments from a dog. Thin Elderly looked at her with admiration. Littlest shook her head. Not just the dog, she admitted. I combined so many things I almost ran out of breath. It was fragments from the seashell and the chrysalis, and it was that other thing too. See what he's holding? Thin Elderly leaned forward to examine the faded animal in the boy's arms. I can't exactly tell what that is, he murmured. It's a silly thing, Littlest explained. A kind of donkey thing, and very old. That's why its color's gone. One ear is mended, and it's patched on its behind. It belonged to the woman once. She called it, Littlest giggled. It be- she called it hee-haw. She was just a little girl, she added, but she saved it all these years, and she brought it down from the attic for the boy the other night because he was having such trouble sleeping. How do you know all this? Thin Elderly asked. She would have done that during the day. You couldn't have been here then. We dream givers come only when they're asleep. Come out to the hallway, he added. We can converse more freely there. They both looked again, fondly, at the sleeping boy, and then Littlest followed Thin Elderly to the corner of the hallway, the place where they had frequently huddled together during the invasions of the Synestete. Tonight, the atmosphere was quiet with nothing to fear. They would still be on guard, of course, but the visits of the hot-breathed intruder became less frequent. So the pair did not huddle apprehensively, but rather settled comfortably in the shadowy hallway corner beside the attic stairs. Now, Thin Elderly said, tell me how you know so much. I'm in charge of you, littlest one, and if you are doing anything dangerous, like stealing away from the heap in the daytime, oh no, I wouldn't do that, she reassured him. Daytime is a very, very hazardous time for us, you know. We are night creatures. His voice was solemn. What exactly are we, Thin Elderly? Littlest one asked him. I asked Fastidious again and again, but she never explained. At first I thought I might be a kind of dog, but I felt a kind of, well, I don't know how to describe it, but a kind of brotherhood with the dog, she giggled, or a sisterhood. But then I didn't have the right ears, and of course, no tail. She wiggled her tiny bottom mischievously, and Thin Elderly smiled. Then he became serious. Littlest stopped changing the subject. I believe that you have not ventured out in the daylight. You are a very obedient little dream giver, as a rule. But you must tell me how you were getting the information. How did you know, for example, that the woman went to the attic in order to bring back that, wrinkling his nose, he gestured towards the bedroom they had just left. That donkey thing, he said. Hee-haw, she reminded him with a grin. Yes, hee-haw. He said the name with a sound of amused disdain. Well, she said, when I touch things, like the dog, yes, but other things too. The photographs, the seashells, the dishes, all of it. Everything. Even hee-haw. Yes, even hee-haw, Thin Elderly smiled at the solemn look on the face of the tiny creature sitting by his side. It all seems to go together somehow, she explained. The parts, the fragments, all the things that I collect. She moved her fingers ever so lightly across his arm to demonstrate. With your gossamer touch, he said. Yes. With my very gossamer touch, I find them all together waiting for a dream, and sometimes things are added in, like I didn't even know about, or touch, like hee-haw. She looked up at him. He was part of the woman's childhood, she said, part of her story. Once there was a little girl, and she had a toy donkey, would be the way her story begins. I already knew her story from the things I'd collected. It's a long story, and it had sad parts. I get a lot of sad fragments from the photograph of the soldier, feelings of never coming back, feelings of now I'm all alone, but the kiss is there too in that photograph. So I always collect there just to keep that kiss fragment for her. And you know what, Thin Elderly? Sad parts are important. If I ever get to train a new dream giver, that's one of the things I'll teach, that you must include the sad parts because they are part of the story and they have to be part of the dreams. You'll be a good teacher one day, he told her. Thank you, she said demurely, but you must stop sucking your thumb. She sighed. I know, soon I will. Anyway, she said, changing the subject, I felt as if I knew Hee-Haw a little, somehow, before she brought him from the attic. Then there he was, in the boys' room. And you know what, Thin Elderly? What? He smiled at her earnestness. I think maybe we gave her some fragments in a dream, some bits of her childhood, happy things. And there was Hee-Haw. She'd forgotten him until the dream. Then she remembered, and she went up to an old trunk and found him again, and brought him to the boy. And somehow, when I saw him there, I understood about the trunk and how the donkey had waited all those years to be given to a boy. And now the boy sleeps. We all helped him, you and I, and the woman, and the dog, and the donkey, Littlest pointed out with a happy sigh. We strengthened him. She giggled. Strengthen is a hard word to say, she confided sleepily. Still, Thin Elderly reminded her, we must be very watchful. Will, she hesitated, not wanting to say the terrible name, will the S things try to come back? Oh, yes, I'm afraid so. They're always out there. I just hope, he paused, not wanting to worry her. Hope what? Oh, nothing. Please tell me. I'm brave. And I hardly ever do it with my thumb any more. Really. Well, he admitted, most ancient still feels the horde gathering. I'm fearful that they are frustrated by the boy's resistance. I'm afraid there's a horde attack coming. She looked at him, wide-eyed. He helped her to her feet and took her hand. But not tonight, littlest one, he said. Tonight the boy is safe. Chapter 22. The young woman's dream giver, Strapping, had had several different assignments in the past. He had bestowed many dreams, but his work had always, until now, been somewhat ordinary. It had even been boring. He occasionally thought, though he knew it was necessary work, important work, he knew that people could not exist without dreams. He had worked in the home of a famous actor once, and another time he had followed a circus as it traveled, assigned to give dreams, imagine this, to a clown. He had bestowed colorful dreams upon drab, dull people, and he had given grim, colorless dreams to people whose lives were vibrant and exciting. There seemed no real logic or order to the kinds of people and the kinds of dreams they received. It was all in the gathering. It was all dependent on memories and the fragments of how they fit together in the jigsaw puzzle world of dreaming. Strapping paid little attention to any of it. He did his job, he did it energetically and according to the rules, but he did it without enthusiasm or interest. Then he'd been assigned to the young woman. The assistant had been a mild punishment for his disinterest. The assignment had been a mild punishment for his disinterest. His heaps leader had simply grown tired of Strapping's casual attitude. She had decided to place him where meticulous attention was badly needed. Strapping was an orderly sort of fellow, the kind who kept track of things, like labels and lists, and appreciated cleanliness. In his own heap, he was sometimes referred to as a nitpicker because he insisted on designating sleeping places, whereas some other dream givers preferred to doze simply wherever they flopped down at the end of a busy night. At first, because of his basic nature, he had been extraordinarily exasperated by the slovenly apartment to which he had been assigned, and by the sleeping woman who, when he encountered her for the first time, was curled on the couch wearing pajamas with top and bottoms unmatched. How irritating that was to Strapping. He had sighed with despair the first night looking around, realizing that he was faced with gathering his dream fragments from chipped china, coffee-ring tables, dirty carpets studded with crumbs, and clothing that had lain unwashed on the floor for days. But he was a caring fellow. It hadn't taken long before he realized, through the collected fragments, how sad and needy this young woman's life was, and because he was keenly intelligent as well, and how great the possibility was that he could help her. This was what Dowager had hoped when she assigned the punishment, because she knew her heap well, and perceived what talent Strapping had to offer, if he could give him the opportunity. It was part of the Old One's tasks to find the right dream-giver for each job. It was why Most Ancient had assigned Fastidious to instruct Littlest One at first, and why after the transfer of instructors, he was keeping a sharp eye on Fastidious to see if it was time to retire her altogether. Now Strapping was doing what Dowager had hoped he would do, becoming what she had wanted him to become. He looked around the shabby dwelling place attentively each night, assessing the changes in the woman's life. He saw her attempts to create a little order. He saw how she had arranged the toys in the second unoccupied bedroom, lining up the matchbox cars on a shelf, placing the baseball cap on the bedpost after she had picked it up from the floor where it had lain untouched for days. He noticed that she had bought, though not opened, a package of nicotine patches, and that she had begun to smoke on the back porch and had opened the windows to air the place, and he could smell the difference. The mail was no longer stacked unopened in the kitchen table by the dirty coffee cups. The cups were washed and put away, and now the envelopes were in the wastebasket, and the open bills lay on the table beside her small calculator and checkbook. He found himself beginning to hope for her future and to care for her in a way that he had not cared before. As she slept restlessly on the couch with the TV and a late-night blur across the room, he chose carefully what to touch and gather: the broken seashell once again, the little baseball cap, the bronze baby shoes that she used for bookends. He wanted to give her dreams of a future with her son. And now we've met a new dream giver that is for John's mom. So tune in tomorrow for the next 3 chapters, and I will see you in the morning or whenever I see you.